"Who do you think you are?" hissed pediatrician Julia Whitman, her lab coat still marked with the Seattle Children's crest. A blind teacher soothing a baby no doctor could. That doesn't exist. In the Little Oaks daycare room, the smell of warm milk and disinfectant hung heavy as Clara Noguera, guided by the rhythmic crying, gathered Anne Hale to her breast, pressed her forehead against the girl's, and whispered a low melody. In seconds, the weeping that had been tearing through the hallways for months became a warm sigh against Clara's neck. On the other side of the frosted glass, Peter Hale held his breath, his hand on his tie knot, incredulous at the newborn silence. Two assistants looked at each other. One dropped her apron. Julia pressed her lips together, her pride wounded. There, among cribs and colorful mobiles, something impossible had just happened. And before the truth could find a voice, all of Seattle would know the story and choose a villain. Early in the morning, when the mist still lingered over the trees of Rainier Valley, Clara Noguera ran her fingers over the braille labels on Donna Judith's medications. "Blood pressure at 8 at dear," her mother reminded her, her voice tired and sweet. Clara smiled, checked the water in her glass, and listened in the background to the familiar sound of Route 7 descending Rainier Ave Essa. The apartment was simple. 2 rooms, worn carpet, a coffee pot that beeped before boiling, an old radio always tuned to the same station. By the door, a folding cane. In her pockets, a keychain with colored beads to mark tasks. Clara had lost her sight and her son Gabriel in the same morning, a difficult birth that took her light and her child. Even so, she relearned the world step by step. She memorized street corners by the smell of a bakery, identified buses by the sound of their engines, and continued studying until she graduated with a degree in early childhood education. "I'll be back before dinner, Mom." "Go with God, my girl, and lean your face here when your soul is heavy," Judith would say, patting her shoulder. Clara would take the Link light rail at Mount Baker Station, count the seconds until the doors opened at Capitol Hill Station, and then confidently follow the route her body already knew by heart. 3 traffic lights, the smell of coffee on E. Pike St., the cool breeze blowing from Broadway. At Little Oaks Early Learning, a daycare center for infants, she could identify each room by the hum of the humidifiers, the tinkle of the mobiles, and the touch of the sensory mats. "Good morning, Ms. Clara." Noah, a 19-year-old assistant, would shout, "Your book cart is on the right." The director, Valerie Alvarez, would greet her with a tight hug. "You have soothing hands, Clara. 2 new babies are arriving today. Take a deep breath." Clara smiled, tied her hair back, opened her pocket recorder, and left herself a message. "Remember, lullaby in C." And a new routine. Across town, surrounded by glass and concrete, Peter Hale, 35, tried to shape days that insisted on falling apart. Founder of Hale Dynamics, he lived in a high-rise building near 2nd Ave, overlooking Elliott Bay, where ferries crossed silently toward Bainbridge Island. The view was beautiful. He rarely looked. Ever since his wife, Emma, died in childbirth, baby Anne had cried relentlessly, in the elevator, in the car, in her crib. Peter did everything in silence, as if afraid of waking a ghost. He warmed bottles, changed diapers, paced the living room while the monitor beeped. Guilt weighed like lead on his wrist, where he adjusted his watch every hour, a nervous gesture that feigned control. "We'll make it, little one," he whispered, rocking Anne against the window. "Mr. Hale, your car to the hospital at 2 p.m. Mark, his assistant, announced over the intercom. "Thank you, Mark. And please let me know I'll be late for the board meeting." Peter was methodical, correct, discreet. He arrived punctually for appointments with a perfect file. Labs in order, notes printed, questions underlined. Anne, however, didn't read files. She cried until her voice broke. They changed babysitters, consulted therapists, bought white noise machines and state-of-the-art strollers. Nothing. At Seattle Children's Hospital in the U District, where diplomas gleamed on the walls, Dr. Julia Whitman, 34, floated through the halls. Impeccable white coat, hair tied back, a practiced smile. Residents greeted her respectfully. Some parents asked for selfies. Julia had a sharp memory for clinical data and a practiced ability to comfort with short phrases. And she harbored, well guarded, a feeling that had crossed the line into professionalism, a silent obsession with Peter. Beyond the unhealthy affection, there was ambition. She was vying for a department leadership position, needed visible results, lived under the pressure of publication goals and internal prestige. Trust the protocol, Peter. Medicine has answers, she would say, resting her hand on his shoulder for a second longer than necessary. For months on end, she was called a savior in conversations around the condominium. Anne's first day at Little Oaks felt like a continuous alarm. The cries came in waves through the hallways of the Capitol Hill daycare. Cribs vibrated with white noise. Sweaty teachers changed classes, and Director Valerie Alvarez called for calm over the radio. "It's Mr. Hale's baby. She hasn't stopped since she arrived," Noah whispered, trying unsuccessfully to rock her. Clara, who was organizing bottles by touch and counting steps to the sensory mat, stopped. Anne's crying had a timbre she recognized, a weariness that touched something very old inside her. "Can I try?" she asked softly. Valerie nodded. Exhausted, Noah carefully passed the baby to Clara, and Clara received her like one might gather a wounded bird. She sat in a low chair, held Anne to her chest, and began a whispered song, all air and melody. With her free hand, she touched the back of the girl's forehead. With his nose, he checked for the smell of sour milk. Nothing. He adjusted the rhythm of the rocking by crying, "Shh, I'm here, little one. Breathe with me." Slowly, in less than a minute, the sound changed. From a scream, it became a sob. From a sob, it became a sigh. Anne hooked her little finger on Clara's index finger and passed out. A thick silence fell over the room, as rare as an eclipse within. From the hallway, Peter Hale saw the scene and stopped as if he'd hit an invisible wall. He'd come to check on her, just for 5 minutes, but he'd forgotten his watch. His shoulders slumped, his eyes filled. It was the first time in a year he'd seen his daughter sleep without a struggle. How did you do that?" he ventured, a whisper of a voice. Clara smiled, still rocked to her own rhythm. She just needed someone to lend a little calm. Almost at the same time, Dr. Julia Whitman appeared in the doorway, a routine visit to assess Anne's adjustment. She stopped when she saw the scene, her jaw set tightly beneath her professional smile. "Interesting," she said dryly. "Let's see if it's just the environment." Peter didn't answer. He just stared at his daughter as if he had just found solid ground. The next day, Peter came back early on purpose. He stood quietly behind the glass window while Clara prepared the bottle by its texture and smell. She warmed it, dripped it onto her wrist, brought it to her nose, and rocked it again. "Good temperature," she murmured. "Clean smell. 3 sips, pause. We'll take it slow, okay?" Anne, on her lap, reached for Clara's breast, not for milk, for warmth. Clara pressed her cheek to her forehead, measured her temperature with the back of her hand, and began singing softly again. The crying, which had begun to rise, subsided like an obedient tide. Anne's eyes grew heavy. She fell asleep again. Peter brought his hand to his lips, holding back a thank you that couldn't fit on his chest. Valerie leaned against him. "She has this effect," she whispered. "I can't explain it. It just happens." Julia was there too. She couldn't resist coming early. He watched for a few seconds, then cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, I recommend a further evaluation this afternoon. We have open clinical hypotheses. It would be irresponsible to attribute this to intuitive techniques." Peter took a deep breath, his eyes still on Clara. "Doctor, the evaluation is welcome, but for the first time, my daughter rested." "I saw it." Julia bit back. She approached Clara with the pad in her hands. "Ms. Noguera, what specific procedure did you use?" Clara kept her voice soft. Skin-to-skin contact, mirrored breathing rhythm, pauses between sips, and respect for her time. Respect is not protocol. Julia replied with a quick smile. With babies, sometimes it's the beginning of the protocol, Clara replied, without acidity. Peter looked away from the glass and, for a second, let the weight of an entire year fall. The impossible had just happened twice in a row, right in front of him. And that was precisely what lit the missing match. Clara's deed not only restored Anne's peace, it also ignited Julia's alert envy. From that point on, the story was officially set in motion. It all started in whispers, in the hand sanitizer-scented hallway of Little Oaks. Doctor. Julia Whitman discreetly brushed shoulders with parents. Oh yes, Clara is sweet, but you see, alternative methods can mask symptoms, she said in a cottony voice. Babies are unpredictable. Without protocol, there's risk. The phrases, tiny drops of social poison, dripped. In the Acorns class messaging group, someone shared a link to the Capitol Hill Bulletin with a bait-and-switch title, Blind Teacher Calms Baby, Inspiring Myth or Silent Danger. The comments turned to flames. My daughter isn't an experiment. The doctor is right, but Hale's baby slept. Clara's name became a public debate without her having said a word. Clara felt it in the air first. The silence that had once been welcoming now had edges. Conversations fell silent when her cane touched the floor. Valerie called her to the principal's office, her voice trying to sound neutral. Clara, just be careful not to discuss your techniques with the parents, okay? The doctor thinks it's best if we focus everything on her. My techniques are cuddling and presence, Director, she replied confidently. And I don't prescribe anything. I just respect the child's time. I know, but we're under pressure. Meanwhile, Peter Hale wavered between gratitude and fear. On 2 mornings with Clara, Anne had slept. On 2 other days without Clara, Anne cried again without pause, irritated, racing, as if her little heart were running a marathon. On those days, Julia appeared ready, briefcase in hand. It's normal for sleep regression, Peter, she said, snuggling her hand on his arm. I brought vitamins and a mild stimulant to regulate the cycle. Don't worry, I'll monitor it closely. Peter frowned. Stimulant to help her sleep. It's a way to adjust the biological clock, dear. Trust me. The deer slipped like honey. Hey, we'll save you from this ordeal. Behind the scenes, no one saw. The little drops Julia prescribed in micro amounts left Anne irritable, sweaty, with a rapid heartbeat and longer cries, exactly the scenario that reinforced the narrative that without the doctor nothing worked. Within weeks, parents were repeating the same old story. Only the doctor can solve it. Julia smiled inwardly. Clara noticed the pattern in the day's texture. Anne's crying had a different weight, a different breath, a different cadence. Picking her up, she felt her skin warmer, her breathing shallower. Valerie, can I ask for a routine record? Feeding times, nap times, and any medications administered outside of daycare? She asked firmly. The director hesitated. Clara, that's up to the parents and the doctor, you know. Limits. I know. I just want to understand why on the days I don't see her, Anne comes back worse. The rumor grew. At the corner cafe, 2 mothers whispered loudly enough to hurt. She's blind. How will she know if the child is serious? Good for reporting, but my son isn't a case for inspiration. At the hospital, Julia fine-tuned her story. She visited Peter with printed reports, colorful charts, and soft conversation. The pain of grief messes everything up. You did the best you could, she murmured, touching his shoulder. I know what it's like to lose. We can have dinner. Talk for Anne. Peter took a half-step back. Not now, Doctor. Thank you. He left and, in the car, relived the scene of Clara singing softly while Anne blossomed with a sigh. But the blog headline echoed, myth or risk, and fear closed her chest. At the daycare, the pressure reached a peak when a father knocked on the classroom door. I want to ensure that my daughter is not touched by this teacher without written permission, he snapped, looking at Clara as if she were a threat. Clara bit her tongue, took a deep breath, remembered her mother, Donna Judith, and replied, "I touch children with respect, sir, and with permission. The rest I sing." Late that week, Valerie sent a short email. "Clara, for now, we will reduce your direct contact with Anne until we align protocols with the pediatrician." Clara read it twice, the world fading around her. In the distance, she heard Anne start to cry again, that cry she already knew how to soothe. And, on the other side of the glass, Julia smiled. Injustice, finally, was underway. Rain pattered against the windows of Little Oaks. The Seattle sky was grey as wet wool. In the nursery, Clara sat in a nursing chair, Anne on her lap, her cheek pressed against her chest rising and falling too fast. Valerie came in with a freshly prepared bottle. "Formula ready? Temperature okay?" Clara took the bottle. She placed the back of her hand on the bottle. She brought it to her nose. She froze. Her face changed. "The smell has changed." "How?" Valerie asked. "It's too sweet and has a metallic undertone. It's not the same formula as always." Clara set the bottle on a tray. "I'm not giving this to Anne." The door opened. Peter Hale appeared, soaking wet, his umbrella dripping on the carpet. "I came earlier. Is she worse?" Clara touched the baby's neck with her fingertips, felt her pulse, and whispered, "Her heart is beating too fast for someone being held. Her lips are a little pale. And that bottle is wrong." She turned her face to Peter. "Take Anne to Seattle Children's now." Peter swallowed. He looked at the bottle. He looked at Anne. The rain seemed louder. "But Dr. Julia said it was sleep regression. That the vitamins—" "I don't argue with the doctor. I just say what I feel and see with my hands. Something's changed here. Please." As if her name had been called, Julia Whitman appeared in the hallway. Impeccable lab coat, perfect hair. "And what dramatization is this?" Her voice came soft but sharp. "Peter, we've talked about it. Bursts of irritation are normal. This professor lives by intuition. Medicine is science." Clara kept her tone low. "I don't want to be right. I want Anne well. If I'm wrong, the hospital will confirm it, and we'll go home. If I'm right, every minute counts." Julia smiled without her eyes. "And you're going to take the baby out in the rain because of a laywoman's nose?" "Peter, trust me. I've been watching Anne for months." Peter stood between them, breathing shallowly. He looked at his daughter. Her little body was warm, but her hands were cold. He remembered the first time he saw her sleep in Clara's lap. He also remembered the following nights, with Anne sweating and crying as if her breast were a cage too small. Clara brought her mouth to Anne's ear and hummed softly. The baby sighed, but her breast continued rapidly. Clara spoke without taking her eyes off the empty space. "Keep Anne upright in the car. No bottles. If you can, call Seattle Children's Triage first. Say tachycardia, persistent irritability. They'll see you." Julia stepped forward, her mask cracking. "Peter, don't be irresponsible. I forbid." He raised his hand, firm, as if finally finding ground. "Doctor, that's enough." He turned to Clara. "Will you come with me?" Clara smiled slightly, surprised by the invitation, and nodded. "I'll ride in the back seat with her." Julia clutched her suitcase tightly. The smile vanished completely. "This will have consequences." Clara tilted her face toward her voice. "If it's for Anne's own good, I'll handle it." Peter wrapped his daughter in a blanket, stuffed the suspicious bottle into his coat pocket as evidence, and ran with Clara down the hallway to the exit. Outside, the rain washed the Capitol Hill sidewalk. In the car, Clara gave simple, clear instructions, almost like a metronome. "Breathe, headlight, left lane, enter 9th Ave, parking, P2, pediatric triage." As they drove away, Julia stood alone at the glass door, her reflection blending with the wet street. Behind her lipstick and lab coat, a cold, silent hatred grew. The seed of truth had just been planted, and with it, the certainty that someone would try to rip it out by force. The King County Metro bus screeched down Rainier Ave as Clara sat in the reserved seat, folding her white cane across her lap. The windows vibrated with rain. The driver announced, "Next, S. Orcas, Saint," and that automatic sound always served as a compass. With her free hand, Clara felt in the inside pocket of her coat until she felt a small, rough plastic card. It was a 6-dot braille label she had pressed herself at the Columbia City Library. Gabriel. She ran her fingertip over her son's name and let the memory come, whole. "You survived, daughter. So survive for him." Donna Judith's voice in that cold room at Harborview Medical Center was the missing blanket. The birth had been a storm, fever, blood pressure rising, a darkness growing behind her eyes like a moonless night. When the light returned, there was no more light and no Gabriel. In the months that followed, Clara learned to relearn. She spent afternoons in the quiet library lounge, sliding her fingers over raised dots until they hurt, spelling out the world again. Love. In her simple Rainier Valley apartment, she labeled rice and coffee jars with tactile tape. She counted steps down Pine Street to the corner of 12th Avenue, memorizing the rhythms of traffic lights. 3 short beeps, pause, cross. She trained her ear to distinguish the neighbor at door 3 by the smell of cinnamon, the mailman by the noisy keychain, people's moods by the heaviness of their sighs. And among all the things she relearned, she discovered something new. Babies speak before words. "That's a hunger cry," she murmured to herself at daycare, her ear almost pressed to the air. "That's tired. That one has an S at the end, a little wheeze. It could be a stuffy nose." That's how she created an alphabet of sounds. The short whimper as the diaper cools on the skin, the trill that precedes the hiccup, the heavy silence of someone who needs a hug before needing a bottle. And the body learned along with it, the rocking on a count of 4, the open palm on the back in 5 strokes, the wordless song that rises from the throat like a prayer. At home, Donna Judith was the haven. She had hypertension, her right knee was giving out, but a lap that always seemed to hold the world. Later, she would be diagnosed with hypertension, with the onset of mild, controlled heart failure. On difficult nights, when the memory of Gabriel arrived with the smell of alcohol and sheets, the mother would light the stove, place the cup of chamomile tea in her daughter's hands, and say, "Close your eyes, Clara." "They're already closed, Mom." "Then open your heart." Clara obeyed. And it was like that, with an open heart, that she learned to use what she had. Her nose to take the temperature, her lips to feel the baby's warm air, her palms to mark the rhythm of calm. It wasn't a miracle. It was method, memory, and love trained every day. The bus slowed to a stop at S. Alaska Saint. Clara squeezed the Gabriel tag, as if holding an invisible hand, and smiled, alone. She understood, once again, why Anne was silent in her chest. Hearts recognize hearts. The baby wasn't just finding a lap, she was finding rhythm, security, and someone who knew how to hear what couldn't be seen. And it was with this simple, immense certainty that Clara stepped off the bus in the light rain, her cane tapping lightly on the concrete, bringing home the strength of someone who has been broken and rebuilt. The next morning, Little Oaks smelled of freshly mopped floors and cinnamon. The cook had baked muffins. Clara arrived early, guided by the metallic sound of the gate, the husky voice of the caretaker saying good morning, and the foam mat squeaking under the children's sneakers. As she leaned her cane against the wall of the nursery, she heard firm footsteps in the hallway and a faint scent of cedar and rain. "Mr. Hale," she ventured, smiling. Peter, please," he replied, his tone restrained, almost shy. "I brought something. I wasn't sure it was appropriate." A rustle of paper. Clara reached out and touched the bow of a package. A sweet scent wafted up, clean, like spring. "Freesias," he explained, stepping forward. "I chose them for their scent. I thought they would be better than any color I could describe." Clara took a deep breath, overcome with emotion. "It's perfect. Thank you." From the adjoining nursery came a familiar little cry. Anne heard Clara's voice and stretched out her arms impatiently. Peter fell silent, watching that invisible bridge between them. Clara walked to the playpen, guided by the sound, and gathered the girl against her chest. 3 rocking steps, a wordless murmur, and the crying turned into a sigh. "I came to thank you," Peter said quietly, so as not to break the spell. "Thank you for saving my daughter from what I couldn't see." Clara settled Anne into the nap position, her hand open on her tiny back. "I didn't do anything alone. Anne teaches me all the time." There was a pleasant silence, filled with synchronized breathing. Then Peter cleared his throat, as if navigating a narrow space. "I wanted to help. I spoke to Principal Alvarez and asked what the class needs. I can pay for tactile materials, embossed books, sensory mats, a braille labeler, if the school agrees, of course." Clara hesitated, her heart torn between gratitude and caution. "Peter, I don't want it to seem like I'm—" She searched for the word. "Taking advantage. It doesn't seem like it, and I wouldn't let it seem like it." His voice was firm, then softer. "It's for Anne, and for the other children who will benefit. If you could also, I wanted to offer transportation and Donna Judith's medical co-pays. Hearing you say yesterday, 'We're going to the hospital now,' made me understand how many times you've had to be strong without help." Clara tightened her grip on the flower ribbon to anchor herself. "My mother has a cardiology appointment at First Hill next week. I was figuring out how to get there. I'll take care of that. Car to the door, escort if you'd like. Just let me reciprocate a little." The office door opened without knocking. Dr. Julia Whitman entered with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a busy morning," she commented, eyeing the flowers as if evaluating a laboratory specimen. "Mr. Hale, I needed to talk about adjusting Anne's medication. Can we talk alone?" Peter straightened his shoulders, his gaze still fixed on Clara's sleeping baby. "We can, Doctor. But first, I'll sign the donation agreement with the principal." He turned to Clara. "Can I send you the list of materials for review?" "Yes, you can. Thank you. Really." Julia inclined her head sweetly. "It's wonderful to see the community involved. Just be careful not to mix up roles. Teachers and parents, each with their own limits. Right, Clara?" Clara took a deep breath. "My limit is Anne's well-being." Peter nodded dryly. "Mine too." The doctor pressed her lips together and took a step back. Minutes later, in Principal Alvarez's office, Peter signed the agreement. Tactile panels, textured books, soft percussion instruments, a braille labeling machine, some lightweight blankets. Back in the nursery, the teachers were whispering excitedly. One of them ran a hand over Clara's arm. "You changed this classroom, you know." Clara blushed, hiding her smile behind her palm. On her lap, Anne smiled in her sleep, that involuntary little smile that feels like a good dream. Outside, leaning against the reception desk, Julia typed quickly on her cell phone, her jaw set. "We need to talk." "She's manipulating the situation." She sent to a contact saved only as HC Management. Putting away the phone, she saw through the glass Peter saying goodbye to Clara with a "Call me if you need anything," and Clara waving, her hand occupied by a baby who was finally at rest. That morning, without signs or speeches, something shifted. In Peter's eyes, Clara was no longer just the teacher who calmed his daughter. She became the person he trusted when everything else seemed like noise. And it was precisely this silent change that lit, in Julia, the most dangerous flame, that of someone who refuses to accept loss. Little Oaks slept. The Pike Pine hallway was wet with drizzle, and the daycare sign pulsed an amber white, almost a sigh. At 12:40 a.m., a thin shadow walked through the side gate with a key fob that jingled once. Dr. Julia Whitman. The key read "Emergency" on a faded sticker, released months earlier with a liability waiver at Anne's parents' insistence for any medical emergency. Inside, the smell was of hand sanitizer and crayons. The motion alarm light blinked like an eye. Julia walked slowly, knowing exactly where to step to avoid the hallway sensor. She passed the older children's room, the kitchen, and up to Nursery B, where Clara Noguera's supply closet was, a shelf labeled in braille, raised labels, small jars of rattles, cloths, a notebook with holes in the pages. Beautiful, she whispered bitterly. Very nice. She pulled 3 amber bottles from her bag, fake labels, vitamin D, calming extract, infant melatonin. Inside, microdose stimulants. She pushed 2 to the back of Clara's shelf and, on the 3rd, stuck a note, use in episodes of lethargy, CN. The signature mimicked the circular handwriting she'd seen on a notice at reception. She locked the door, took a deep breath, and before leaving, she grabbed her cell phone and opened a new email with an address she'd created that day, a non-Capitol Hilly. She typed, Little Oaks Daycare, blind teacher using non-prescription drugs on baby, her locker. Urgent. She attached photos of the locker and a fake report of alleged episodes, adding a veneer to the absurdity. She sent it. She stood there for 5 seconds watching the dark screen reflect her own shadow, and left. The next morning, the light rain turned to mist. The Little Oaks gate opened at 7:30 a.m. with a line of strollers. Clara arrived at 7:15 a.m. as always, counting steps, her cane leaning against the inside wall, the murmur of parents, the squeak of bottles, the occasional cry. Anne arrived at 8:02 a.m. As soon as she heard Clara's voice, she stretched out her arms. "Good morning, little bird," Clara said, picking her up. "Today's story smells like vanilla." At 8:17 a.m., 2 Seattle Police Department patrol cars pulled up in front. The sound of doors opening cut through the hallway. The receptionist stammered. Principal Alvarez came running, apron over her dress. "Good morning, gentlemen. Did something happen?" "Anonymous tip." The sergeant showed the printout. "Possible administration of unauthorized substances to an infant. We need to investigate." The complaint came with photos and a report, and we received preliminary approval from the administration for verification. The judge, in a summary legal consultation, issued a restricted search warrant. The nursery fell silent. Parents looked at each other. A mother pulled out her cell phone, already recording. The director tried to argue, but the officers were firm. "It's procedure. We need to check the lockers of the aforementioned employees." "Mine?" Clara asked, her voice small, holding Anne in her lap. "Ms. Noguera," the officer said, less harshly, "we ask for your cooperation." Clara handed Anne to her classmate Sophia, her hands trembling. "Excuse me, little bird, I'll be right back." The locker opened with a click. The officer rummaged through the first shelf, the second, and then backed up a centimeter, as if finding something glowing in the dark. He pulled out the amber bottle, read it, showed it to the director, then found the second one, way back. "What is this?" the director whispered, horrified. I've never seen it," Clara said, genuinely lost. "Please, I don't wear anything unauthorized. I don't." "We'll have to take you to the police station for clarification," the sergeant said. "Handcuffs, please." "Handcuffs?" The word broke from Clara. "In front of the children." "It's protocol, ma'am." "Principal." Clara searched for Alvarez's voice. "Please, Clara." The principal's eyes were watering. "I'll go with you. The school will accompany you. But they have orders." The icy handcuffs touched Clara's left wrist. Anne began to cry in the nursery, as if she understood. The filming continued. 2 parents backed away. A venomous voice crackled. "I knew it, blind teacher. That never inspired me with confidence." Clara took a deep breath. "I would never hurt a baby," she said, staring into the void where she imagined the camera. "Never." In the hallway, a familiar scent, cedar and rain. Peter Hale appeared without a jacket, pale. "Oh, what's happening?" His voice trailed off as he saw the handcuffs. "Clara, they found vials in her locker," the principal whispered. "But I don't believe it." Dr. Julia Whitman appeared behind her, hair tied back, her lab coat polished. "Oh my God, how awful. Peter, let's get Anne out of here now. She's in danger." Clara took a half step, restrained by the officer's hands. "Peter, I don't." He held his breath, torn between instinct and fear. I need to think about Anne, he said, his eyes apologetic. Let's go to the hospital. Of course, Julia answered first, sweetly. I'll go myself. Clara stood, handcuffed, listening to their footsteps retreat. Anne's cries following suit, the sound of videos being sent. The world sank beneath her feet. Within minutes, headlines appeared on cell phone feeds. Como. 4. Blind teacher investigated for alleged baby poisoning at Capitol Hill Daycare. Kiro. 7. Police serve warrant at preschool. Parents in shock. A nasty blog blared. Miracle or quackery? In Rainier Valley, Donna Judita was slowly washing dishes when the phone rang non-stop. A neighbor reported it, trembling. Judith hung up and clutched her chest. My girl, she whispered, sitting up slowly. God, keep my girl. She reached for her walker, took the worn medallion from her pocket and began to pray, her hands trembling without Clara there to support her. The patrol car took Clara to the East Precinct on 12th Ave. The back seat was hard and cold, the blare of the police radio cut like metal. The reception area smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. They removed her handcuffs and gathered her belongings. A simple cell phone, her wallet with her library card, her white cane. Can I call my mother? She asked. One phone call, the officer replied professionally. After triage. The custody cell had a narrow bed and a scratchy blanket. A fan hummed lowly. Between the bars, the voices of other detainees came and went like waves. Clara pressed her hands against the metal. I'm not what you say, she said to the void. Someone laughed in the distance. Another coughed. The humming continued. Lying down, she tried to breathe the way she taught babies. 4 beats in, 4 beats out. But every time she closed her eyes, she heard Anne crying, saw in her mind the taped note use in episodes of lethargy, CN, felt the cold handcuffs, and Peter's words, I need to think about Anne. An officer approached. Noguera, do you need something? Yes, Clara replied, her voice almost childish. Justice. The officer didn't answer. She left a small bottle of water on the cell shelf. Outside, the city was giving its opinion. Notifications were pinging. Julia, somewhere between the hospital and her cell phone, smiled without showing her teeth. Peter, hugging his daughter who had started crying again, trembled with doubt. Donna Judith wept alone in the kitchen. And Clara, in a narrow bed, felt something break. Not her faith, but the idea that the world would see her even when she couldn't see. From that moment on, everything she had achieved hung by a thread, and yet, deep within her chest, a stubborn spark remained lit. Truth breathes, even in the dark. The dawn in the East Precinct on 12th Ave seemed endless. Clara's cell smelled of disinfectant and iron. She felt in the pocket of her cotton blouse and found Donna Judith's rosary beads. She wrapped her fingers around the worn beads. Mother, lend me your strength, she whispered. For me, for Anne, for Gabriel, she prayed softly, as if telling a story to her own heart. When sleep finally came, it was short and light. When she woke, something different, dizziness, a buzzing sound. Clara sat up carefully, leaning against the cold wall. She blinked once, twice, 3 times. A streak of light cut through the grey. She held her breath, slowly turning her face. The flickering reflection of the grate appeared in the door's peephole, then an outline, the shadow of the agent walking down the hallway. Miss Noguera, the agent stopped. Do you need water? Clara opened her eyes again, wide. I can see a little, she murmured, her hands shaking. There's light. They took her to the police station's infirmary. Nurse Brent performed the most basic exam in the world, a raised finger on one side and then the other. Clara watched with her eyes, tears welling up. It's not common, but it happens, Brent said gently. It could be partial. It could be temporary. It could be related to optic neuritis or a reversible post-inflammatory neuro-ophthalmic condition. I'll record it and refer you for evaluation by a neuro-ophthalmologist. But it's real. Back in the cell, They handed her the phone number. She dialed by heart. "Mom!" Her voice came in sobs. "I can see a sliver. The contours. I saw the bars. My girl," Donna Judith cried loudly from Rainier Valley. "I knew God wouldn't leave you alone. Hold on to this. Hold on tight." Clara leaned her forehead against the wall. It wasn't her previous vision. It was a crack, but cracks let air in. Across town, at Seattle Children's Hospital, the world was turning upside down. Anne had a seizure at dawn, high-pitched crying, hot skin, racing heart. Peter arrived pale. Dr. Julia Whitman took the chart with almost theatrical professionalism. "Let's run tests," she said, composing her composure. "The daycare center is a highly variable environment." Nurse Tasha delicately drew the blood. Hours later, the lab called the floor. The result was critical. Toxicologist Dr. Priya Kapoor came up personally. "Mr. Hale," her voice firm without flourish, "Anne has a trace of a stimulant in her blood, microdose. That doesn't fit with daycare routine. It's a molecule you can't buy in a pharmacy. It's a hospital." Peter gripped the back of the chair. He looked at Julia. She opened her mouth, closed it, and held his perfect gaze. "Could be contamination," he tried. "Could be a mistake." "We double-checked," Priya replied. "I'll open an internal audit. We need to cross-reference prescriptions and cameras." In the basement, the clinical pharmacy pulled up the system logs. Mark Ellison, a pharmacist with square glasses, scanned the inventory. Who had dispensed, when, and for whom. A list of names and times appeared. 3 vial dispenses in the last month. Julia Whitman's signature. Times very close to Anne's seizures. Mark frowned. He called Priya. "I have a pattern, and it's ugly." Priya went upstairs with the spreadsheet. Peter read it line by line. The floor shook beneath his feet. The image of Clara in handcuffs invaded his mind like a tearing guilt. "I'm going to vomit," he whispered, sitting up. "Let's get evidence," Priya said dryly. "I'm going to contact compliance and security." At Little Oaks, Principal Valerie Alvarez, weary face, soul on fire, gathered the staff in the conference room. She closed the blinds. She pulled up the camera footage from Corridor 2. At 12:41 a.m. the previous morning, a tall figure, a lab coat under an overcoat, swiped a card at the side door. Julia. At 12:45 a.m., she entered the nursery room. She stayed for 6 minutes. At 12:52 a.m., she left with her bag a little fuller. Valerie paused the video. The silence weighed heavily. "Does anyone want to tell me why a pediatrician who isn't on the school staff comes in here off duty?" Her voice was controlled. No one answered. Sophia wept softly. Valerie copied the files. Inside her head, the clock ticked. Clara in the cell, Anne in the hospital, the city crucifying an innocent. She sent the recordings to Priya Kapoor and, on impulse, to Peter. The email went out at 11:07. "You need to see this." 5 minutes later, the principal's phone rang. "Valerie," Peter's voice was broken, I let the wrong person get close. I didn't see anything." "So see now," Valerie said, "and do what needs to be done." Peter crossed Seattle like someone crossing a desert. He drove up I-5, got off at Madison St., parked in the hospital's visitors' spot, and, breathless, walked to the legal department. He requested a meeting with compliance. He handed over the emails, the spreadsheets, the images. Priya presented the report. The circle closed with a word no one wanted to say out loud: sabotage. In the hallway, Julia appeared with a tired smile. "Peter, news about Anne." He looked at her as if it were the first time he'd truly seen her. "Stay away from my daughter," he said calmly, dangerously. "What?" She looked away with a short laugh. "Peter, you're stressed. Stay away." He turned his back. Julia stood rooted to the white floor, the cold lights reflecting off the impeccable enamel. For a second, her hands trembled. That afternoon, Valerie went to the police station with a blue folder. Images, access logs, team statements. She asked to file a report, attaching everything to the case file. A clerk noted, New evidence rules out employee involvement. The prosecutor's office received a copy. Clara's public defender, Evan Brooks, breathed a sigh of relief for the first time in days. "Miss Nogueira," Evan walked to the holding cell. "Good things have arrived. Evidence. Strong. You're not alone." Clara clutched her rosary. "And Anne? She's under observation. Stable. And the truth is coming out." She closed her eyes, letting 2 tears fall. Then she opened them, and for the first time since Gabriel, she saw not just light, she saw form. Evan's blurred face, the doorframe, the outline of hope. Daisy de Kunda dusk. Peter sat in the armchair in Anne's room. The girl slept, breathing softly, the monitor beeping in rhythm with the sea. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, the photo he'd found in his wife Emma's closet. Emma, smiling with a baby in her arms they hadn't had time to watch grow up. He leaned his forehead against the window. "Emma, I messed up badly. I let fear get the better of me. I doubted the person who cared for our daughter most after you. I'll fix it, I promise." His phone vibrated. An email from Priya. Audit complete. Exclusive access. Dr. Julia Whitman. Meeting with police scheduled for 8 a.m. Peter closed his eyes. The board had turned. In the East Precinct, Clara could tell night was coming by the changing sounds on the street. A worker sweeping the sidewalk, a metal door lowering. She lay down and breathed, 4 by 4. "Tomorrow," she said softly, playing her rosary, "tomorrow I fight with my eyes open," and for the first time since the handcuffs, he slept with a thread of peace. The King County Courthouse on 3rd Ave seemed taller that morning. Clara Nogueira climbed the steps, feeling the city's vibration beneath her, and for the first time in a long time, seeing the outline of the columns, the shadows of reporters, the profile of Peter Hale standing a few steps away, huddled in a dark blue suit. The cold Seattle wind was biting, but there was warmth in Donna Judith's hands, which clasped hers. "Are you seeing clearly, daughter?" Judith whispered. "A little, Mom," Clara replied. "Moved. Enough to keep your eyes open." Inside courtroom 4B, the court clerk announced, "All rise. The King County Courthouse is in session. Judge Eleanor Park presiding." The audience rose. Cameras moved discreetly. Pens at the ready. Julia Whitman sat at the defense table with attorney Alan Pierce. Stiff posture, impeccable mascara, a fake smile. In the front row, Valerie Alvarez and Priya Kapoor exchanged a brief wave with Evan Brooks. Clara's public defender. "State of Washington versus Julia Whitman," announced Assistant District Attorney Marcus Green. "Rising charges, attempted murder, fraud, trespassing, and falsification of evidence. And regarding Miss Clara Nogueira, this district attorney's office moves for the immediate dismissal of any restraining order for lack of just cause in light of the new evidence." A murmur ran through the auditorium. Julia's eyes widened for a second and composed herself. "Bring the witnesses," Judge Park said firmly, her voice cutting without shouting. Marcus Green walked to the lectern. The Jumbotron came on. First panel, toxicology report. I call Dr. Priya Kapoor, toxicologist at Seattle Children's Hospital. Priya swore to tell the truth, sat down and positioned her glasses. "Doctor Kapoor, what substance was detected in Anne Hale's blood?" "A hospital-grade amphetamine in a microdose, belonging to a specific batch, card 17CH-AMP, batch 4431, dispensed by the hospital's clinical pharmacy." "Is this substance sold in a regular pharmacy?" "No, only in a hospital setting with strict access control." "And what is the effect of this microdose on a 12-month-old baby?" "Irritability, tachycardia, persistent crying, sleep disturbances." A chart that could simulate the need for intensive medical monitoring. Marcus displayed the second slide, the dispensing chart. "This is Mark Ellison, clinical pharmacist." Mr. Ellison, who physically removed the vials from batch 4431. Mark cleared his throat and consulted the spreadsheet. Dr. Julia Whitman at 6:42 a.m., 2:11 p.m. and 11:57 p.m. on 3 separate dates. Do the times coincide with the baby's seizures? They coincide, he replied dryly. The screen displayed the graph. Seizures versus withdrawals. One line overlapped the other like two interlocking hands. Objection. Alan Pierce, Julia's attorney, said, "The hospital is a dynamic environment. My client is a pediatrician. Withdrawing a drug does not prove illegal administration. The objection will be considered at trial," Park said. "Proceed." Prosecutor. Marcus took a breath. Another slide. Images from Little Oaks. "I'm calling Valerie Alvarez, director of Little Oaks Early Learning. Ms. Alvarez, what do we see?" The side entrance to the daycare, 12:41 a.m. Dr. Julia Whitman enters with a badge, one that doesn't belong to her, and remains in the nursery room for 6 minutes. Who has this badge? Employee Sophia Mendez. She reported losing her card the week before. Did you give these images to the police and the hospital? I did. The air grew heavy. Julia crossed her arms. All circumstantial, Pierce grunted, turning to her. Remain calm. I'm calling Peter Hale. Peter walked to the podium, shoulders tense. He swore. Marcus approached cautiously. Mr. Hale, when Miss Clara Noguera was arrested, did you believe she might be responsible? Peter looked at Clara. She saw him, sharp, pain and remorse on his face. I was afraid, and fear made me doubt the person who calmed my daughter when no one else could. I was wrong. Were you warned by Clara about a bottle with a different smell? I was. And because of that, I went to the hospital that afternoon. If it weren't for her intuition, my daughter might not be here. No more questions. Pierce stood, straightening his jacket. Mr. Hale, you've been emotionally fragile since your wife's death, correct? Yes. Peter kept his chin firm. And you developed a dependent attachment to the first person who calmed your baby. Don't you think that might have clouded your judgment? The truth has cleared it, Peter replied. And the truth doesn't depend on me. It depends on the evidence. The lawyer backed away, irritated. I'm calling Mrs. Clara Noguera. Clara stood. Her legs trembled. But the world had edges again. She swore with her right hand, her left holding the rosary. Miss Noguera, do you have a medical degree? No, I'm a baby teacher. How did you know there was something wrong with the bottle? Smell and temperature, Clara said clearly. I've heated thousands of bottles. It wasn't the same. It burned her nose, and Anne became hostile to the touch. Did you poison this child? Never. No more questions. Pierce tried to pounce. Miss Noguera, do you have any grudge against Dr. Whitman? Clara hesitated. I'm afraid of what she did. That's all. Enough, Judge Park cut in. The court will not tolerate unsubstantiated insinuations. Marcus adjusted the last slide. Printed copies circulated. It was the compliance report. Chain of custody, signatures, access logs, inconsistencies, and finally, the police report on the vials found in Clara's locker, Julia's fingerprints on the inside lid, and the absence of Clara's fingerprints on the inside lid, confirming that she hadn't even opened the vial. Your Honor, Marcus said calmly, we have an identified substance, a linked batch, exclusive access, images of the break-in, fingerprints on the planted vials and the absence of Clara's, and a time pattern that fits. The state dismisses any charges against Clara Noguera and requests an arrest warrant for defendant Julia Whitman. At the defense table, Julia was breathing rapidly. Pierce leaned in. Don't say anything, Julia. Judge Park turned. Defense! Pierce spread his hands, rolling a final dice. Your Honor, my client is a respected pediatrician, dedicated to children. The facts may seem... Park interrupted. Eyebrows raised. What seems here is a trail of evidence. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Julia snapped. He never saw me, she exploded, her voice trembling, pointing at Peter. Never. I saved shifts, pulled all-nighters, and this man only had eyes for the blind teacher who sang lullabies. I needed results, recognition, the department head, the publications, and he only saw that woman. Dr. Whitman, Pierce whispered, pale. No, I gave microdoses. Micro? She gestured, frantic. Enough to keep Anne. She searched for the word, couldn't find one that wouldn't condemn her. Unstable. That's how he needed me. That's how he would see me. I was going to interrupt later, just until the air drained from the room. Valerie clapped her hand over her mouth. Priya closed her eyes. Peter froze. Clara felt her heart pound in her fingers. Judge Park leaned forward, her voice steely. Dr. Julia Whitman, you have just admitted to intentionally administering a controlled substance to an infant outside of protocol for the purpose of manipulating the child's clinical condition. This is not love. This is a crime. Officer, she pointed. Handcuffs. The bailiff approached. A sharp click sounded. Julia tried to free herself. I did it for love, she screamed again as she was lifted. For love, for control, Park corrected, frozen. And for vanity, the judge turned to Clara. As for Mrs. Clara Noguera, all charges and restrictions are dismissed with a dismissal for total lack of just cause. In plain language, you are free. This court deeply regrets the damage to your reputation. Clara brought her hand to her face. She felt tears, saw the shine of them. Evan squeezed her shoulder. Thank you, Your Honor, he managed, his voice breaking. Park finished. Defendant Julia Whitman is remanded immediately to county custody, without bail, to answer for attempted murder, fraud, trespassing, and tampering with evidence. A sentencing hearing will be scheduled. Gavel. The mallet came down. The sound echoed long and hard against the wood. In the front row, Peter closed his eyes, tears held back, his entire face apologizing for what he couldn't yet put into words. When he opened them, Clara was already looking at him, no longer just with her ears and heart, but with her eyes. He took a step, then another. Forgive me, he whispered, inches away, his voice cracking. I should have believed you from the beginning. Clara took a deep breath. She pressed a hand to her chest to contain the trembling. She looked at Anne, sleeping in the stroller, her cheeks flushed, and then at Donna Judith's hand, firmly in hers. We can't turn back time, Peter, she said softly, but we can start right. She made a space in her hand. He took it. A small gesture, but worth a whole city. Beside him, Valerie smiled with relief. Priya nodded. Evan put away his files. Outside, Seattle remained grey and beautiful. Inside room 4B, the truth had won, with evidence, courage, and dignity. Clara left the courtroom free but not unharmed. When she opened the door to her Rainier Valley apartment, she found Donna Judith paler, panting, her blood pressure uncontrolled, and her medicine cabinet nearly empty. Before her despair could turn to tears, someone knocked. Peter was in the hallway, drenched in the Seattle drizzle, with a bag from the 24-hour pharmacy, a folder with receipts, the referral to Harborview Medical Center, and a look that finally said it all. This time, I saw, and I'll take care of it, he said simply, without choreography, and he went in. The following days were filled with presents. Peter took Judith to Harborview, waited on hard hallway chairs, paid for tests, organized the medication in blister packs by schedule, placed tactile stickers on the drawers, and created a spreadsheet in large print for Clara, who could still see in outline. In the kitchen, he learned to make chicken and vegetable soup the way Judith taught him, and left braille labels on the jars. Late in the afternoon, he walked with Clara down Pine Street, counting steps, helping her practice her slowly returning vision. There were no speeches. There was filtered coffee, timely medication, and a quiet embrace. The day after the verdict, Little Oaks issued an official retraction and a public apology to Clara. Seattle Children's initiated disciplinary proceedings. The Washington Medical Commission initiated proceedings to revoke Julia's license, and the hospital immediately revoked her credentials and privileges. Peter also made a public statement clearing Clara's name and acknowledging the collective error. The press that had condemned her gave equal space to the reparation. Months passed, and life shed its skin. One clear afternoon at Little Oaks, Anne saw Clara at the gate and took off with small, unsteady steps, arms outstretched, Mama Cora, her way of saying, Clara. Clara lifted her off the ground, laughing and crying at the same time, while Peter, a few steps behind, let the old guilt drain away with the cold wind blowing off Elliott Bay. There, the trio recognized each other, not as patients, saviors, or guilty parties, but as a family in the making. When Judith stabilized, with her hypertension under control and her mild heart failure under management, they moved into a small two-bedroom apartment in Queen Anne, a sweet irony of a name, with a narrow balcony from which they could watch the twinkling of ferries crossing the bay. There were no luxuries. Just a bookshelf with Gabriel's photo, a guitar leaning against the wall, a desk scarred with homework, Anne's stroller parked near the window, and the smell of plain cake on Sundays. At night, Clara would lean her forehead against the glass and say, "I see the little lights of the boat." Peter would put his arm around her shoulders, and in Clara's lap, Anne would fall asleep without medicine, without tricks, just with a low song and a quiet heart. Because when someone decides to see with their heart, they heal what the world has hurt.